$50 a night. That's what a single kennel run can bring in. Multiply that by 30 dogs, and you're looking at over $1,000 a day, just for a room and a bowl of water. It looks like the easiest business in America. Buy some land, love dogs, and let the money walk in on a leash. Here's the twist. You're not renting out rooms. You're taking custody of 40 living, breathing animals overnight, and in most states, the law doesn't require you to have a fire suppression system, doesn't require a staff member on site while they sleep. One bad wire, one bad night, and the business you built can be gone by morning. So what does it actually cost to get in? At the low end, an independent operator can open a small boarding kennel for somewhere between $77,000 and $154,000. That covers your equipment, your build-out, and a few months of cash to survive on before customers start showing up. But that's the small end. Step up to a franchise, and the number changes entirely. Dog daycare and boarding franchises typically require somewhere between $532,000 and $1.1 million for a facility that might run 5,000 to 10,000 square feet. Want the biggest name in the industry? A Dogtopia franchise alone can run you anywhere from $780,000 to nearly $1.5 million once you count construction, training, and working capital. And Camp Beau Wow, the self-proclaimed #1 dog boarding brand in the country, asks for a minimum of $500,000 in capital just to get a territory. Now here's where it gets strange. Sitting right next to those numbers is a franchise like Preppy Pet, which keeps its franchise fee down around $20,000 to $34,000. Read that again. $20,000 versus $1.5 million for what looks, from the parking lot, like the exact same business. A building, some kennels, a fenced yard. The dogs can't tell the difference. The bank statements can. Franchise clues. What actually separates them isn't the dogs. It's everything invisible to the customer. Zoning laws that decide whether you're even allowed to have barking animals near a residential block. Kennel licenses that vary wildly by state and sometimes by county. Distance requirements from the nearest house. Fire code exemptions we'll come back to later. These are the filters that quietly decide who gets to play at all, long before a single dog ever checks in. And that $500,000 to $1 million buy-in? It's not a one-time toll you pay and move past. It's exposure, capital sitting on the line, waiting to find out whether the building it paid for is actually as safe as the brochure implied. Once the doors are open, the real business starts. And it's not one revenue stream, it's a stack of them, each one thinner than the last but adding up fast. Layer 1 is the obvious one, overnight boarding. This is the base of the pyramid, the thing that gets you in the search results when someone types "dog boarding near me" before a vacation. Rates here are wider than you'd think. A standard kennel run might go for $30 to $60 a night, depending on the market. But step into the premium tier, climate-controlled suites, webcam access so owners can check in from their phones, individualized play schedules, and that same night can command $50 to $75 or more, compared to $25 to $40 for a traditional kennel stay. Same dog, same square footage of floor space, almost double the price, just for the illusion of a hotel room instead of a cage. Layer 2 is daycare. And this one matters more than people realize, because it's not really about the money on any single day. It's about the relationship. Daycare is how a nervous new customer tests you out before they trust you with their dog overnight. Nobody hands over their pet for a week-long stay to a stranger. But drop-in daycare, a few hours here and there, that's low risk enough to try. Every daycare customer is a future boarding customer being quietly recruited, one afternoon at a time. Layer 3 is grooming and training, sitting on top of both of the first two. A dog that's already there for daycare doesn't need to be walked in the door twice. You just offer the bath, the nail trim, the basic obedience class while they're already on site. It's the upsell that costs you almost nothing in customer acquisition because the customer already found you. Layer 4 is the one most owners underestimate until they're deep into the business. Retail and premium amenities, pool time, private suites, transport services, picking dogs up from the owner's house. None of it is essential. All of it is margin. Because a customer who's already paying $50 a night for peace of mind rarely blinks at another 10 for a swim. Now let's put the layers together and look at what a working facility actually pulls in. Take a small operation. 30 dogs, $50 a day, open 30 days a month at 80% occupancy, and you land at roughly $36,000 in monthly revenue. That's from boarding alone, before a single dog gets groomed or a single owner buys a bag of treats on the way out. Scale that up to franchise level, and the ceiling gets a lot higher. One well-known franchise reports individual locations hitting $1.2 million in sales, with $400,000 in EBITDA within 24 months of opening, and that's not an outlier. Mature multi-service locations in this space are generating anywhere from $900,000 to $1.5 million in revenue at 25 to 40% EBITDA margins. For a service business built on cages and chew toys, those are private equity-grade numbers. But, and this is the part the glossy franchise brochures leave out, every one of those numbers assumes something that isn't guaranteed, that the kennels are full. Occupancy is the entire game here, and it doesn't arrive on day one. Most locations reach only 45 to 55% capacity within their first 12 months, climbing to 60 or 70% by year 2 if things go well. Break even, for a lot of operators, doesn't show up until somewhere between month 20 and month 36. Think about what that actually means. You've already spent $500,000 to $1 million getting the doors open. You're now running at less than half capacity for your entire first year, while paying full rent, full staff wages, full utility bills for a building sized for a business you haven't grown into yet. The revenue layers we just walked through, boarding, daycare, grooming, retail, they're all real. They're all stackable, and none of them save you if the kennels sit half empty while the fixed costs keep arriving on schedule, month after month, whether the dogs show up or not. That gap between what the business can earn at full capacity and what it actually earns while it's still filling up is where the real risk in this industry quietly lives, and it's about to get a lot more dangerous once we look at what's sitting inside that building every single night. So here's the mechanism nobody puts on the franchise disclosure document. This is a business with high fixed costs, thin margins in the early years, and revenue that depends entirely on occupancy staying full. We just walked through that math. But layered on top of that fragile financial structure is something far more dangerous. A physical one. Every night, dozens of living animals are locked inside a building, unsupervised, often with no legal requirement that anyone be there to notice if something goes wrong. That's not an exaggeration. It's regulation. When a fire department in Georgetown, Texas reviewed the code after one of the worst incidents in the industry's history, they confirmed that even a facility holding a proper kennel permit would not have been required to have a fire suppression system or staff on site overnight. Read that again. The permit that lets you legally operate a building full of animals Doesn't require anyone be awake to save them if something catches fire at 2 in the morning. Fire is only the first domino. The second one is biological, and it's becoming more common, not less. Operators used to deal with kennel cough as a quiet, seasonal nuisance, a handful of coughing dogs, easily managed. In the past few years, outbreaks of serious respiratory illness have become more widespread and frequent. And when a new strain hits a region with no built-up immunity, it doesn't stay contained to one kennel. When canine influenza first reached a major U.S. metro area, it was severe enough to shut down veterinary clinics, boarding facilities, and daycares outright. Put 50 dogs from 50 different households in the same building, and you've built the perfect transmission chamber. One infected dog checking in on a Monday can mean an empty, quarantined facility by Friday. Here's why this isn't just bad luck. It's structural, and it's why one incident can take down the entire business instead of just denting a quarter's earnings. Remember the occupancy numbers from the last section. Most facilities aren't running near full capacity even in a good year, and they're carrying a full year, sometimes 3, of fixed costs before they break even. That means the business has almost no financial cushion built in. Now take a facility in exactly that fragile state and run the domino chain. An incident happens, a fire, an outbreak, a death in the facility's care. That triggers a state investigation. The investigation generates inspection reports, and those reports are public record. Local news picks it up because "dogs died at boarding facility" is the kind of headline that travels fast in a town where everyone knows everyone with a dog. Customers who were already choosing a boarding facility on trust and word of mouth, because that's genuinely the only currency this business runs on, start canceling and posting reviews. Occupancy, which was already thin, collapses further. But the lease is still due. The staff still needs paying. The debt on that $500,000 build-out doesn't pause because the kennels are empty. That's the trap. It's not that boarding facilities are dangerous in some dramatic, unusual way. It's that the entire business model is built on a foundation with almost zero margin for error. Wrapped around an asset, dozens of live animals, overnight, largely unsupervised, that regulation frequently doesn't force you to protect. The financial fragility and the physical risk aren't separate problems. They're the same problem, feeding each other. A business that can't absorb a bad quarter is sitting on top of a risk that can produce a genuinely catastrophic night with very little warning. And this isn't hypothetical. It's happened more than once, in more than one way. Let's look at exactly how that trap plays out in the real world, because it doesn't always look the same, and that's part of what makes it so dangerous. Start with the fast version. September 2021, Georgetown, Texas. A facility called Ponderosa Pet Resort caught fire overnight. By the time it was over, at least 75 animals were dead, sparked, investigators later determined, by an electrical device or outlet. This wasn't some unlicensed backyard operation cutting corners in the shadows. The business did hold a permit to operate. It simply didn't have a kennel permit specifically. And even if it had, the fire department confirmed that wouldn't have required a fire suppression system or staff on site overnight. The regulatory gap we just talked about wasn't a hypothetical. It was the exact hole this business fell through. What happened next is the part that matters for anyone thinking about the economics. More than 20 pet owners sued the company and its owner, seeking over $1 million in damages, alleging the business had promised 24-hour surveillance and security systems it didn't actually have. One electrical fault, one night. 75 dead animals. A lawsuit seeking 7 figures and a business that will never operate under that name again. That's the fast collapse. The domino chain from Part 5, played out in real time, in under 12 hours. Now here's the slow version, and in some ways it's the more instructive one, because it shows the trap doesn't need a dramatic fire to work. It can happen through 1,000 small failures instead of one big one. In Fountain, Colorado, a facility called Boardmore Pet Resort didn't collapse overnight. It eroded, one inspection at a time. State records show the business failed 6 inspections over the course of a single year. Along the way, a dangerous dog escaped its kennel and attacked another animal, injuring an employee in the process. Another dog reportedly died after the facility failed to seek veterinary care for her in time. Then, while one family was on vacation, 2 of their dogs were killed at the facility. Records later showed the state's licensing program had already received multiple complaints about Boardmore in the months before that happened. The warning signs weren't hidden. They were sitting in a file, accumulating, while the business kept taking bookings. The state ultimately suspended the facility's license entirely and ordered it to cease operations, and the owner is now facing criminal charges. Same underlying mechanism as Ponderosa: thin margins, an unsupervised risk, a business that couldn't absorb the fallout once it started, just stretched across a year of failed inspections instead of a single catastrophic night. And there's a third variation worth knowing, because it shows even the most basic operating costs can become the failure point. In upstate New York, a facility called Anastasia's Acres was investigated after 21 dogs were found dead, with authorities determining the cause was inadequate water and ventilation for the animals in their care. No fire, no dramatic headline event, just climate control, one of the most unglamorous line items in any boarding facility's budget, failing badly enough to be catastrophic. The owners were charged with 22 counts related to overdriving, torturing, and injuring animals, and failure to provide proper sustenance. 3 facilities, 3 different failure points. An electrical fault, a pattern of neglect, a broken HVAC system. Same ending each time. The business is gone. The owners face legal consequences that follow them long after the doors close, and every dollar of that $500,000 to $1 million buy-in from Part 3 is gone with it. The dogs were never really the fragile part of this business. The margin for error was. So which version of this business do you end up owning? The best case looks like the franchise numbers from Part 4, a facility that survives the slow climb to full occupancy, stacks its revenue layers correctly, and comes out the other side generating $400,000 in annual profit on a couple million in sales. Real money for people who treated the fire code, the ventilation system, and the overnight staffing schedule as seriously as they treated the marketing budget. The worst case is Ponderosa. It's Boardmore. It's Anastasia's Acres. It's the buy-in from Part 3. $500,000, sometimes more, gone in a single inspection report or a single bad wire, with a criminal charge waiting on the other side of it instead of a return on investment. Here's what's strange, though. When you put both outcomes side by side, the difference between them was never really about how much someone loved dogs, or how nice the lobby looked, or which franchise logo was on the sign out front. It was about who took the invisible 30% of the business seriously. The fire suppression system nobody's forced to install. The ventilation nobody checks until it fails. The overnight coverage that costs money and generates zero revenue of its own. That's the part worth sitting with. This industry sells itself as the softest business you could possibly own. Wagging tails, happy customers, a job where the product loves you back. But underneath that, it runs on the same cold arithmetic as any other capital-intensive operation, with thin margins and a single point of failure. You're not really in the business of boarding dogs. You're in the business of being the one thing standing between 40 sleeping animals and the one bad night that's always, statistically, somewhere out there waiting for a business that gets complacent enough to let it in. If a story like this one, a business that looks simple on the surface and turns out to be anything but, is the kind of thing you want to keep seeing, this channel exists to keep finding them. Subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.